Our priority, that stands a distant second for us, but like all of you, our priority is the spiritual. And it's great to hear that the Carta study says even with a haphazard approach, we're still knocking it out of the park, which probably just proves the fact that it's still our number one priority, even though we're doing it in this way. But this is our number one priority, but we don't have any kind of plan in place for it. We kind of know, like Jeff said, we're doing a good job, and we kind of know what we're doing, but as soon as that A+ teacher with 30 years of experience leaves in the third grade, ooh, that third grade's in trouble, because she had faith formation down. Why? Because she's a longtime parent, longtime teacher. She kind of got what 10-year-olds should get in the third grade, and she was really killing it. And so every day she had a great biblical worldview lesson, but the school itself didn't really own that. The teachers owned it. And so she developed it. And that's true of most Christian schools. We started in the 60s and 70s, and we did the best thing we possibly could. And some of us are connected to church, some of us are not, but we've just done this hodgepodge approach, and sometimes it's worked great depending on when your child went through the system and graduated, and other times not so much. So we decided, hey, let's get something in writing. So for us, we formed a committee, and just the really quick nuts and bolts in that committee, which was made up of leaders and teachers and things like that, you know, and I drove it because I really wanted to see this get done, like all of you. And one of our first jobs was, hey, let's research what's out there, not necessarily what's out there at other schools, because I've been doing this 27 years. I knew there was no other school we could call, at least not within driving distance. So we just started doing online research. You know, how do kids grow spiritually? How does this work? You know, what would be some good benchmarks or things like that? You know, just thinking through this whole spiritual formation process, because like most of you, it was a core value for us, the process by which kids are more fully united with Christ. That's kind of how we define it, especially with regard to life and calling. That's kind of what's in our core values. So what's out there? So I came across this article written by a guy who was the former president of Awanas Clubs. You might be familiar with them. And he had written an article based on adolescent psychology, and he said, listen, parents, it was all designed to parents, and he said, these are great spiritual markers for you in the home to start training your child, introducing your child to Christ, and then watching them mature as they go through adolescence. So while you've got them, 0 to 18, here's great spiritual training for your child, introducing them to the Lord, and then discipling them. I thought, and this makes perfectly good sense. It's like 3 pages, easy to understand, it's good. If this works for parents at home, and we exist as an extension of the home, why would this not be good for us? It's based on good adolescent psychology. So I took that article back to the meeting, and other people brought other things, and I kind of presented it and said, what do you guys think? Doesn't this make good sense? And everybody with a pre-K early childhood mindset said, yep, that's right on the money. That marker that he identified in that article makes a whole lot of sense for that age group. Well, of course it did. It was written based on adolescent psychology. Kids can understand respect at that age. They don't always get grace at age 4, but they can get respect. Respect, this is hot, respect for the parents, respect that yes, there is a God. I'm not sure how all this works, but I can understand, respect. Then I can understand wisdom really well. And it doesn't always work this way. Some kids get grace, early. They get it at 7, 8. Some of you probably were saved at age 6 and 7, things like that. But by and large, not quite yet. Studies show most kids accept Christ between the ages of 10 and 12. And if they don't accept Christ between the ages of 10 and 12, the stats plummet from like 30-some% to 4% in junior high. So he said grace has to be a marker in elementary, and specifically in grades 4, 5, and 6. And so we used that article and we used those markers to really come up with our plan. And so this plan is based on, and if you read it, it proceeds in this direction: respect, wisdom, grace, trust, and perspective. So trust is the junior high marker, and then perspective is the high school marker. And then that's really all we stole from that article. We said, those are good markers, now let's turn it into something that works for a school. And the reason why I think it was a big hit with the staff, because then we took the next 2 years to flesh this out, was the fact that it finally, just saying those things, like, hey, listen, if you're in grades 1 through 3, here's your focus. Just that alone was like the clouds parted for the staff. They're like, oh, so if you mean to tell me if I teach 2nd grade, my spiritual marker, or my whole tunnel focus, whatever you want to call it, is wisdom. That should be kind of the spiritual target for me? Yes, because kids can get wisdom at those grade levels. grade levels 1, 2, 3. And at our school, we really want a lot of what you're doing, most of what you're doing, chapels, the curriculum, the activities, anything that you do, drive wisdom home. Because in 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade, we want them to really get what wisdom is. And we define that as the ability to apply God's word to everyday life situations. Our 1st graders memorize Luke 2, verses 1 through 20 verses that they say on stage every Christmas program. That's memorization of the scriptures, taking that and applying it to your life. They can do that at age 6. They have to hide it in their heart first, right? So they do that, they memorize it, and then they learn to apply it to their life. They can do that in grades 1, 2, and 3. And then so we want you to be all about that. If they come to know the Lord in 2nd and 3rd grade, fantastic, that's a bonus. But that wasn't our sole driver, because research shows that it's probably going to come a little bit later, but maybe it won't. Whatever, it's a bonus. If you're in grades 4, 5, and 6, oh, it's all about grace. Make sure everything you do is about grace, because we know we really, really, really want them to come to know Christ. And we're a discipleship school. But before they go to junior high, because the wheels fall off at junior high, don't they? Right? I mean, they do. It's the last thing on their mind in junior high, because when you hit junior high, you are your number one priority. And you're usually dissatisfied with you. That's why the spiritual marker in junior high is trust. Because most junior high kids really are insecure. They're not happy with how God made them. They're too tall, too short, too big, too little. I'm not good at math. I'm not this, when's somebody gonna like me? Why don't I have a boyfriend? Why don't I have a girlfriend? Blah, blah. Life is very tumultuous. That is the pre-pubescent years, things like that. Again, we didn't come up with this. We just looked at the research and they said, hey, teach your kids trust in those junior high years. Duh. Why aren't we doing that as a school? Let's focus on that in grades 7 and 8. And high school, all about perspective. You start to mature and you realize there's a bigger world out there than just your little box at Mansfield Christian School. And so you start to introduce things like apologetics and other worldviews and things like that, and that should all come with a good, healthy high school perspective that prepares you, for graduation and life outside of MCS. So that made a whole lot of sense to us. So then we spent 2 years asking the staff, okay, if we give you these markers, which they thought were great then, how would you do that, and what are you already doing? Like Jeff and Dale had said before, you're already doing a lot of these things. And they went, yeah, this is pretty good. No wonder our Bible curriculum is written like this. Probably on the same things. So what can you do to drive in this at your grade level? And then that was what you see in the white papers. That came out of this. So it's still very fluid. We are in year 1 of having it done. There's always 3 phases: creation, implementation, and assessment. We've done creation, now we're in the implementation phase, and we're just doing it for the first time, I think, well. We just had our some PD earlier this week. Tuesday we had early release day, and so we had one of our meetings, part of this was to ask people, how you doing on this? Is this marker working for you? Things like that. So we anticipate tweaking this. We probably won't send this off to printer, because this is kind of just the pull out, the glamour version of what we're doing, but we certainly will tweak the white paper, because we would expect we would get better, right? It's just like your curriculum guide. So now at least we have a plan, and so maybe the 6th grade teachers in a couple years will say, you know what, we're going to pull that out of the curriculum because it didn't seem to work for Grace there, but we're putting something else in. Or you know what, we came up with a new activity that's great, that really reinforces the need for salvation and grace. So we want to make sure that gets into our spiritual formation plan. So the work is ahead of us to keep making it better and better and better, but we accomplished our goal, and what I wanted was just something that we could use and we could give to potential customers to say, guess what? This is our trump card. We have a spiritual plan for your child if you enroll them at our Christian school. We are not just doing the same thing that XYZ public school is doing via the state standards. Those are the floor. But let me tell you why you pay $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 to send your child to my school. This is the reason. This will last for eternity. Those other things will get you a nice citizenship in the state of Ohio and the United States. Wonderful. We're glad for that. But that's bare minimum. You can get that for free anywhere. This you have to pay for, unfortunately. But that's the state that we're at. Our ESOs are on the back to highlight a point that Jeff was making, and that's what we all talked about. We, like most schools, like Dale said, and Bobby said, we adopted 20-some ESOs when ACSI, for accreditation purposes, said you have to have ESOs. We all said, okay, can you show us what those might look like? They sent us a sample of 25, whatever, we all said, those will work, we just adopted those. And then 5 years later, we looked at them and thought, there's way too many, how do you assess this? This is way too long, they're all good, and they're shared from, like you said, Christian schools, Christian schools. So we took our 21, I think we had, and we boiled it down to 7. And those are on the back. That's why we, it's a narrative format we expect our students to, and blah, 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 that's based on graduation. Well, in that committee, we found that, boy, 7 ESOs, 5 of which are spiritual in nature, only 2 were academic. So how are we gonna assess those 5 spiritual ESOs? This plan, and all the things that go with it. So that was really what came out of this. So it's hard to get to this if you don't have ESOs, or like he said, a profile of the graduate or something like that. Because you kind of have to start there and say, okay, if we're gonna have devoted followers of Jesus Christ, kids who impact the world, kids who make a difference, if we're gonna have that, how do we set that up? So the key though was having those markers in place. Because when you get the markers in place, then you can start plugging in, ooh, this makes sense. This unit or this whatever we do in this activity is all about wisdom. Where should that go? Goes in the wisdom slot. Grades 1, 2, and 3. Could they do it down there? Ask them. I don't know, let's see. Could they tweak it? Is that something they do? Blah, blah. Maybe it doesn't fit there. Not everything's gonna fit completely boxy, but it really gives your staff just a great, great channel of saying, okay, now I have a plan, and I know what the expectation is. It's great for us now as administrators at evaluation time to ask those teachers, hey, how you doing on spiritual formation? Because you're in charge of trust. You're our 7th grade science teacher. How do you do trust? And what have you done? Like Dale said, what lessons are you targeting trust? What activities, blah, blah, gives us something to talk about instead of, how's your biblical worldview integration going? Well, I taught that lesson and it's going okay. I mean, what do you think? It's a hodgepodge. Some teachers knock it out of the park, other teachers, they went to a public high school themselves, they went to Ohio State, they love the Lord, but they have 0 training. You gave